Welcome back, ballroom dance friends. Today's video is a part 2 in response to several people commenting that they would like to hear about my life in the ballroom dance world and how I came to be a professional dancer. So if you missed part 1, you're curious about dancing when I was younger, I'll include a link to that below. And let's get back to it. Okay, so when I left off in my last video, I talked about how I got into ballroom dance, how I was taking as many groups and privates as possible. Now this was in a tiny studio. They only taught American style. There was only social dancing there, so not super high level dancing. What happened was my teacher, who was also a social level teacher, I found out he used to compete pro-am, and he encouraged me to come to a competition with him with maybe 6 of his previous students. So he was older at this time. I'm going to guess maybe 70. And so I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. I'll tag along. And this was a small local competition, so very close to home. I didn't need to fly anywhere. I believe this comp was the City of Roses. Unfortunately, our independent local comps have all gone under. But at that time, that was from my little town, a big comp of the year. And it's at that competition I saw for the first time championship level dancing. Now, this wasn't like the most elite dancers in the country, but it was open level dancing. People that would have made it out of maybe one round in championship nationally. This includes one of the couples I saw. I interviewed recently Kelly. He was one of the dancers there that I saw that was very inspirational to me. So ironic, after all these years, now he's my student, because I was watching him compete open when I very first went to the first comp. Anyway, I obviously was gobsmacked. Never seen dancing like this. My studio was just shuffling around the floor, kind of muscling our way through the steps. I mean, I was amazed by the costumes, by the joy on their faces, obviously by the dancing, the showmanship. I was hooked. And I was like, wow. I can't even say it that day I wanted to compete, but I was like, I would like to be able to dance like that. So that was truly a life-changing experience for me. That weekend changed the course of my whole life. Okay, so our city at that time had a handful of competitions a year, maybe 5. And so one of the couples I had seen competing there, he also practiced at the studio that I took lessons in. Now, the way that little studio worked, I was in a totally separate room from any of the other dancers. So he had seen me walking in and out. He could probably spot me through that little window of the door, looking in while I was taking my lessons. And he could see that I was already, even before I had seen decent dancing, striving to be the best dancer I could be, and I was there all of the time. So there was an upcoming competition. This was a USA dance comp, so very inexpensive. And at that time, we had a very big local dance community. Not super high level dancers though. And only like 2 or 3 couples doing international style, because we had no international style teachers residing in our area. So they would have to go to lessons or wait for teachers to fly in, which some did regularly. And so he suggested, he's like, hey, why don't you try competing with me at this comp? And I can't even say I was nervous. I was excited because I was still on a high from the beautiful dancing I'd seen at the previous comp. I had seen that there were different skill levels of dancers, so I wasn't overwhelmed by the dancers that were better than me. I could see, looking at that floor, that I could probably hold my own, even with my limited experience. Mind you, at this point, I'd been dancing, I don't know, maybe 5 years. I mean, it wasn't my first rodeo. I was dancing a lot of privates, as much dancing as I could get in. So showed up to the comp, and first of all, it kicked off with a giant workshop, which I showed up for. It was included with the competition admission price. As I've shared previously, the USA dance comps are extremely cheap, dirt cheap. At that time, they were not open to Pro-Am or pro dancers though, and they continue to this day to be run by all volunteers. At least, for USA Dance sanctioned comps that were hosted at my studio, I gave them a big discount because it's a nonprofit, and obviously, as a studio owner, I have vested interest in supporting the local dance community as best I could. And most of my students were amateur couples. I have done prom as well, but I've primarily done amateur couple teaching. Anyway, so I attended this workshop, and I could see, it was huge. I don't know, maybe 70 people there. I was one of the best, if not the best dancer in the room, because I had been assisting in that group classes. I think definitely helped, and just because I was taking certainly more privates than any social dancer in their right mind would invest in. So that was motivating. I was like, okay, well, I think I can hold my own here. And we ended up competing in Latin, international Latin. Now, at that time, I had only had a few practices with him. However, as you probably know, there's a ton of cross-pollination between the international Latin syllabus and the American rhythm syllabus. So we only did a cha-cha and a rumba. When you start out competing in these lower levels, at an amateur comp, and he was an amateur, as I was too, you tend to only do less. Unsanctioned comps are a little different, but you'll only do a couple dances in bronze. So he just taught me a little bit of terms of like the straight leg action and stuff, but pretty much kept all figures that I already knew. And fan, alamana, hockey stick. For me, these were incredibly intuitive to follow. That was no problem at all. So we were off to the races. We went to this comp. I attended the workshop. I watched every single event. I bought my first pair of Latin shoes at that comp in the vendor area. Thank you, vendors. I'd only purchased like teaching/practice shoes before then. So it was my first time dancing in heels. For me, it did not make a big difference, but I was quite young, so it didn't matter, I guess. I have pretty good balance. And we went out there, and although it was just bronze, again, we had a hefty community of dancers at that point. Honestly, a lot more than we do right now. We're still kind of recovering from COVID. Anyway, it was a quarterfinal. So there were, I'm going to guess, maybe 20 couples that competed. It was on the bigger end of 24. It was definitely not like 14 couples. It was a lot of couples. And we ended up winning first. We got called back to the final, and I was so nervous out there focusing on my dancing. I didn't even have a perspective of if I would make that final. I wasn't watching anyone else. But when we got recalled to the final, I thought, oh, this is so exciting. Okay, so this is like drugs. I'm totally on a high. And we ended up winning first. And I was stunned. And I was elated. And I was addicted. Okay, so he ended up not being a permanent partner for me. That is the only comp we ever competed in because he already had a partner. So shout out to Michael for encouraging me to dance with him at that comp. I don't think I ever would have had the courage otherwise. And starting out, I don't think I would have wanted to invest in Pro-Am at that stage of the game. I didn't even understand everything involved. It was just such a low cost event to do a USA Dance competition that it was very little investment. So if I crashed and burned, big deal. Okay, guys, I'm already over my 10-minute mark again. And so I'm going to come back next time and share how I actually kind of met my first little partner and how my dance life grew from there. So, guys, thank you for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed that little story. I'll be back first thing in the morning. If you want to share your kind of first competition story, I'd love to hear that in the comments, including you pros. And if you are a pro, definitely maybe stay in there because I think the amateurs would love hearing our story too, because we've all started out at that very first competition experience. But I think we can all relate to the euphoria we felt there and how it changed our lives. So thank you so much for joining me. Happy dancing. If you like all things ballroom dance, hey, subscribe and join us. We are a worldwide community of ballroom dancers. We share the same frustrations and joy and many of the same experiences. And we share that here. So I'll see you in the morning. Bye, guys.